Hello everybody, how's it going? Decrease your conversion, common ways to lock people out. And we had the quick intro already, we have that behind us. Sometimes I present like that. So we're a crew that calls themselves onesie.js, but now in the summer that's not the best outfit. So maybe in the winter time you will find some of these people around. Yeah, and I'm a front-end developer, occasional teacher, organize some meetups, and this year for the first time we'll organize a conference in Berlin. One day before Beyond Tolerant, November the 5th. One day full of accessibility stuff. I'm already freaking out about that, but we still have 5 months to go. So we will hopefully make that. And I work for a company that is called Contentful. So that's one of these content management systems in the cloud. So when you're building your JavaScript apps and you don't want to set up your own database and deal with the infrastructure, and you just want to make AJAX calls, what you do anyways, you can give Contentful a try. And I'm developing for the web now for 7 years or 8. And I started my journey in one of these teams, conversion rate optimization. Has anyone worked in e-commerce before? What's the usual conversion rate in e-commerce? So for us at the time it was conversion rate of 2 to 3% to making an order. And depending on your business, when you tweak this conversion rate just a tiny little bit, this actually means that you make a gazillion more money, right? So think of Amazon. When you're Amazon and you tweak it by 0.1%, you're getting richer. And this is why we spend ages on optimizing, and we A/B test everything 10 times. But when I set up all the A/B tests, it always felt to me like that. What actually leads to the decision? Is it the button color, red, green, right? Is it the timing? Is it the mood of the person? Or at the end, is it just the weather? Which is so true for e-commerce, right? Because when the weather is good on Sunday, nobody buys something on Sunday. But don't get me wrong, I'm making a little bit of fun here of conversion rate optimization. I think it's really important to optimize because we have to understand our users. But what I want to tell you in the next 40 minutes is that there is maybe more to consider than color, text, and features. Because at the end, we're dealing with people. And people care also about web performance, inclusive design, and accessibility. And these are 3 topics that are really close to my heart. So let's jump right in. Web performance first. And talking about web performance, I have to say that probably I'm not alone in this room here. I live in a bubble. And I live in a really healthy bubble. So I'm here right now with a Pixel 2, right? It's so expensive phone, it's unbelievable. I've got 10 gigabytes EU-wide data, fast, so I travel without worrying. And I've got this MacBook Pro, it's now 2 years old, but it's still a heavily expensive and powerful device. And the thing is that I'm not the baseline. I'm not your or my customer. So when we're building stuff for the web, I think we should ask ourselves where our next customer will come from, right? Because maybe we're building the next Twitter, which means that we're not only serving Germany or the Netherlands or the UK. So what are the top 10 countries with the most internet users? India. Perfect. So we have China, India, the USA, Brazil. At some point there's Germany also in there. And according to the MIT, 90% of the 730 million people from China browse the web with a mobile device primarily. And you know how it is. There's not always Wi-Fi everywhere. And when we think of mobile data usage, what is interesting about that is that people pay different amounts of money for the same data. So what you see there is with a 4G connection for 35 euros, you get in Finland unlimited data in a prepaid contract, whereas in Germany or the USA, you get 4 or maybe 5 gigabytes, which means that people pay different amount of money for information. And I'm internet addicted, probably you are too, so that is kind of interesting to think about. Tim Kadlec also found that this information is really interesting, and he built a website that is called What Does My Site Cost? And what this website does, it compares the page rate of your site and correlates it with the income of the given country. So maybe you can say, yeah, my website costs 5% of the income in Africa or something. This is really, really interesting data in my opinion. And especially when you're building not only for Europe or something. So let's maybe do a little bit of math. So I'm from Germany and I've got this blue mobile provider where I can buy a prepaid plan where I get 1 gigabyte for 10 euros. This actually means that I can visit a website with 2.5 meg 400 times, right? This means that one visit costs me 2 cents. And I'm ignoring caching headers and all this stuff, but think of that these are 2 cents right out of my pocket. The median image transfer size today is 800 kilobytes. And when I'm talking about images with other people, I see always a lot of people smiling, but I see this done wrong so often. So let's just quickly talk about image formats. So we've got 4 traditional ones, right? GIF, JPEGs, PNG, and SVGs. So if it's a vector graphic, please, let's all go for the SVG. Otherwise, go with a GIF, a PNG, or a JPEG. Then do you need fine detail, high resolution, or transparency? You can go with the PNG route. And then you can also check how many colors you need. Otherwise, go for a JPEG. And then I looked around and I found this image here in a blog post that just was in my inbox. It's 2000 pixel wide and this will appear a few times today. So but how much money does this actually cost? So as a GIF, it costs 1 cent. As a PNG 8, almost 1 cent. As a PNG 24, 3 cents. Okay, we're leveling up. And as a JPEG with quality 64, half a cent. I think that's really nice because we can save people some money. Then there are also exotic image formats. So there's JPEG XR, WebP, JPEG 2000, FLIF, and BPG. And now we're entering cross-browser land. So we've got JPEG XR in the Microsoft universe, WebP in the Google universe, and JPEG 2000 in the Safari universe. And yesterday, actually, I discovered Microsoft will support WebP, which kind of changes the picture a little bit. So Edge development is relatively fast these days, so soon we will be like this, which makes WebP actually something to use. So the same image with the same dimensions, 1/10 of a cent. Nice. That's something that I really enjoy when I'm building stuff for the web. So how would you use WebP today? Well, we have the picture element, right? And the picture element can also feature detect supported image formats. So when you go there from top to bottom, you see that the browser will check, okay, do I understand this image format? All right, cool, go for this. If I don't, go down the elements. And then there's this fallback element, which is used when nothing is supported. You could also do some server-side detection with the acceptance header of a browser. I'm not the biggest fan of that, but the browser will tell you, hey, I understand WebP. Then you could serve that one too. But maybe we don't actually need a different image format. There are also different JPEG encoders. So what is out there is libJPEG, modsJPEG, and Goodsly. And you can put these into your build process, and then you set up at once, and you can save money for your users. So we've got the same image, 400K, half a cent. Then we've got Goodsly, which is a Google encoder, okay, 0.3 cent. But modsJPEG cuts it in half again, which maybe means that you can avoid the hassle of shipping different image formats. If you want to learn a little bit more about images and all these kind of things, Una Kravitz gave a really nice talk that was called The Joy of Optimizing. Highly recommend that. But where did I find the image in the first place? Well, I found it in this article on Medium, which had a page rate on desktop 21 megabyte. And it had, on mobile, even more, 30 megabyte. Would you pay 30 cents on your phone for an article of which you don't even know if you like it? And this article was written by a well-known tech company, by a well-known developer. So what was in there? Well, there were these 4 images, all PNGs, and none of these were resized properly. They were all 2000 pixel wides, no matter what. And we have responsive images today, right? We have the source set and sizes attribute, which can save data and money for our users. And maybe you even have a server-side a service in place where you can just append a query parameter and then you're good to go. This is what front-end developers, or that is what I love. So I resized all the images and I went for JPEG instead, and I came out at 0.2 cents. 200K, not even. And it took me 2 minutes. But you might ask now, okay, Stefan, but you were talking about 30 meg, right? So where is the rest here? Well, the rest was this. A 24 megabyte GIF of code. I'm not really sure how I feel about that at all, but yeah. So let's switch the topic a little bit and let's go on to video. When video is in place today, according to HTTP Archive, the median video transfer size is almost 2 megabyte, which is ridiculous. And on my private website, what I do is I fairly consistently document what I learn, really short posts. And what I started when I started writing these posts, I started with GIFs, right? Because this is what the internet is about, GIFs and cats. So I had this is the site, and you see some GIFs in there. And just by switching from GIF to MPEG-4, I was able to cut 10 megabytes. When I discovered that, I was like, holy, why is no one using MPEG-4? I don't know, because GIFs are the internet. And then I automated everything away, which is just a little snippet in my dot files, to also compress the MPEG-4 properly, which also means that I will save some data on the wire. But maybe there's even something better than MPEG-4. There's also WebM, which is a format that is built for the web, that is built to save data. And then you can use the video element, and then we're doing the same thing. Check from top to bottom if it's supported or not, and then you can save some money, right? So you saw this little GIF of this Chrome thing here. So initially as an MPEG-4 it was 5 cents. Then I compressed it properly and I got down to 1 cent. And then I served it with WebM and I got half a cent. I think this is really powerful. And then let's again automate everything away. So when I create new videos, I optimize them with one command in my dot files, and then I transform it to WebM, and then I'm good to go. Talking about videos, what I want to tell though is, let's please all use video responsibly. Years ago I was lucky and was able to record this thing here. So you see 2 newspapers, the New York Times and the Guardian. And I don't want to know what Audi paid for this, but they're shipping an ad on the New York Times with a huge video. Did I ask for that? No. How much money did this cost for me? Well, nobody cared. So let's just check and use data a little bit more thoughtful. So the last piece of things that are transferred over the wire is text. So front end 101, let's all minify and compress everything. This is usually done with gzip or something like that. But then there's also a new compression algorithm which is called Brotli, which compresses a little bit better than gzip. So this is just a tiny piece, but maybe you want to use that. Brotli has some gotchas though. It only works on HTTPS, and the encoding is really slow. So you cannot do this on the fly like with gzip. But when you generate all your assets, you could do this, and then you're good to go. Facebook and Dropbox and companies like that, they're all shipping Brotli. So this was the web performance part. And web performance on the front end today is a huge topic, right? We could talk about fonts, H2, progressive web apps, caching, speed index. But Yeah, I don't have time for that. But what I do is I run this online resource, which is called Perf Tooling Today. So if you want to look up anything performance related in the front end, I'm pretty sure that you find a resource there that helps you out. So when we're not keeping performance in mind, when we're building stuff for the web, we're most likely locking people out that live in less populated areas. My parents live in the middle of nowhere in North Germany. Can I use my phone there? No, because nobody cares about data. We're locking people out that cannot afford expensive plans, right? There are people that cannot pay 60 euros or 70 euros for this, yeah, give me all the data contract. Some people really just run on 1 gigabyte per month, or even less. And I haven't used the conference Wi-Fi today too much, but yeah, when you're on conference Wi-Fi, you will also notice that these kind of things matter. So I think that when we're building for the web, we should always think of the fact that information shouldn't be a privilege. And I consider myself to be a web professional, and I want to make the internet as affordable and accessible as possible. And this is usually good enough for me, right? Because I want to build good products. But sometimes you have to convince someone that these efforts are worth it. Then you need kind of stats, right? Pinterest increased something according to performance improvements. BBC loses users because of slow sites. Or the train line makes that much more money because they are now faster. These are kind of statistics that project managers want to know, or that can be an argument for performance. If you want to have these arguments, WPO Stats, ran by Tammy Everts and Tim Cudlek, has exactly these kind of things, where companies publicly say, we're faster now and we're making more money. That can be really helpful. But let's take a step back from web performance. In the United States, and I'm just talking about the United States because the data available is usually United States, there are 57 million people with some sort of disability. The overall population of the United States is 321 million. And let me tell you something about these people. 70% of these people will leave your site when it's difficult or hard to use. For the UK, the 70% have a purchasing power of 16 billion pounds. And now let's cut 70% of that. So this may be part of the money your companies make? Maybe. Which brings me to the next topic, which is inclusive design. So in case you haven't heard of it, inclusive design is a design methodology that enables and draws on the full range of human diversity. And the human diversity is great, right? We're all different, and that's kind of the beauty of it. So let me just tell you a story. I was in London, and I was giving a presentation there, and there was a sound engineer, and he gave me this device, right? And what he said to me was kind of interesting. He was like, hey, press this button to mute this thing. I cannot see that, but you can probably. I was like, huh, okay. The thing was that there was one LED, right? Red and green. Every 12th man is affected by a sort of color blindness. For women, it's only 1 of 200. So let's see how the beamer is. So when we look at this picture, looks good to me, I guess. For some people, it can look like this, or like this, or like this. Do you consider color in your products? In Berlin, every startup does some sort of graphing and data viz and things like that. And let's look at a graph. This works kind of for me, but it could become completely unusable when you rely on color only. So this could look like this or like this. And checking for color is not that hard. There's the excellent Chrome extension that is called Funkify. And Funkify provides given personas for different kind of disabilities. And this is super helpful and cool. So you can check your website quickly. Hey, does this still work when a person cannot see all the colors? Or does this still works when something, when someone has dyslexia or low vision or something? This is super interesting when you try your products with this Chrome extension. So 2 years ago, I was doing a redesign of my private website. And I'm not a designer, right? So I went out and I asked the designer, hey, Christoph, can you do me a new website design? He was like, yeah, sure. This is what he came up with. My eyes are still okay, I think. And I was publishing an article about accessibility. And what happens when you write an article about accessibility? Is Hayden here, by the way? No, he's not. Okay. So when you write an article about accessibility, Hayden tells you that your blog is inaccessible. And he was right. The design that the designer gave me was inaccessible in several ways. So when we look at this, there were font weight and contrast problems all over the place. It looked pretty and good to me, but it was useless for some other people. And these kind of things are automatically detectable. So what you see there is the X project, which ships within CLI. And you can, contrast and font sizes can be automated. So you can then see, hey, does it work? Is that okay? And you can automate that and put that into your CI process. And there are a few more tools out there. So there are Tenon, the AC checker, X. So this is a nice link where you see the comparisons and the pros and cons of these. And someone pointed out to me the last time that Peli is also really good. So that's also a common tool that ships with a dashboard and a CLI. So putting something like that into your development process can make your product better. Another thing is that Google now starts checking accessibility too, right? So what you see there is Lighthouse, which started as a tool for progressive web app testing. And they ship with accessibility monitoring now, which is really cool. Because this is what you use when you build your hipster, cutting-edge progressive web app, right? So when you want to have a score of 100, you have to be accessible too, which I think is really nice. Microsoft has also a tool that is called Sonar Whale, which, yeah, just to point out, the accessibility tool there is broken for a few months now, so maybe it's fixed at some point. Also, Chrome is shipping with an accessibility inspector now, which is when you were in the talk today in the morning, which gives you access to the data that is inside of the accessibility tree. So you can see here the accessibility tree and the attributes that are represented in there, which sometimes can be really helpful when you don't want to, you should spin up a screen reader at some point, but when you just want to do a quick check. And the last thing about this is this will ship in Chrome Canary at some point, because I spoke about contrast. In Canary today, there is also accessibility contrast checking. And when you enable that, you see this is the one standard, WCAG AA. So when you want to check that while developing, you can do that easily. And it's right at your fingertips. This will go into Chrome Stable soon. Firefox is also bringing accessibility tools. They're right now in the developer edition. But maybe checking these kind of things when they hit my table, as a developer, maybe that's a little bit too late. Maybe the designer, Christoph in this case, should have taken care of this. So there's also accessibility tooling, for example, for Sketch. So you see there, yep, Stefan, this contrast ratio is not good enough. And maybe when you have collaboration with your developers and designers, maybe you should have something like this, which is a tool like Colorable. And what you can do there is you can set up a color matrix, and then it gives you the contrast ratio for given font sizes. And then you can say, this is safe to use. Cool. And that's it. End of discussion. So I fixed all the things at the end, and I have to say, for me it's less pretty. I think it was prettier before. But more people can read my articles, and that's the whole thing of me sitting down on a Sunday and writing 500 words, right? People rarely drop because of the lack of prettiness. So let me tell you another story from the same event. So it was this event in London, and there was some live streaming going on, and the speaker after me, she wanted to play some audio. And the sound engineer was again like, I'm not sure if that's possible. And I saw that for the first time 2 years ago at the Vue Source conference. The conferences and events started live captioning, and you see it there, the audio. And this could have helped her in that moment, right? If she would have had a video with transcriptions, we could have just said, well, we can stream that, And it doesn't matter if we can hear it, because the people that, it was just 30 seconds or something, was not too crucial. But then everybody can still follow. And this also helps me. For example, I've got hard troubles understanding a person from New Zealand, because that's a really troublesome accent. Live captioning can help me and can make my day. And how often do you, who buys tickets for public transport with a phone? That's me, right? So every morning I'm running, and who hits the wrong button because the link is too small or the button is too small? There are recommended sizes for touch interfaces, right? So it's 4040 recommended by the WCAG 2.0 and Apple, and Google says it should be 48 CSS pixels. So when you're not kind of thinking of these kind of things, you're locking people out that cannot turn on sound. So when I sit in the public transport, I want to listen to something and I forgot my headphones, transcriptioning can help make my day. When you sit in the sunlight and wearing sunglasses, then contrast ratio matters for everybody. And some people cannot pay full attention because they have to do something else. Then a touch target that is not that tiny can help to make your product usable. In the end, we can or we should think of more possibilities. And please, and this is the one thing I want to say, as developers, let's stop do that. That's the design. No, it's not. The thing is that we're working together, a lot of people, and designing products is not only for making them pretty. And front-end engineers today are not only pixel pushers, right? We're kind of front-end information architects. At the end, it all boils down to education, collaboration, and being inclusive. When you break your arm, then, and you have to navigate everything with your left thumb, then you will discover that good products are accessible products. And these kind of tiny, tiny details at the end matter for the success of your products. There was recently a tweet by Safia Abdallah, and she asked the Twitter sphere, if you have a disability, what's the hardest thing about browsing the web? This tweet had 1.6K retweets. And the answers, the top answers were lack of captioning, color problems, too small touch targets, and distracting animations. So again, American statistic. In America, there are 69 million people with something that is called vestibular disorders. These are problems caused by the inner ear, which makes people feel dizzy. And these people react really heavily to motion when they don't expect it, or to motion in general. And actually, Apple is doing a very good job helping there and being inclusive. So on iOS and on macOS, you've got this one setting that is called reduced motion, which is then available in your CSS and in your JavaScript, which means that you can adjust your product to not fly in and to not animate everything. And fixing this can be as easy as that, right? One of the few use cases. You're an important person, Sarah, right?
Yeah, I love that.
and Apple then they ship their products like this, right? So there's this subtle animation going on. But when you have reduced motion turned on, it's just like that, which can maybe make someone not sick and not feel dizzy. I think this is super cool. And who remembers when macOS Sierra was released? When I saw that for the first time, I'm not even sure if I have something like that, but that even made me dizzy when this happened. So when you have reduced motion turned on, it just looks like that, which is, I think, really, really cool. At the end, inclusive design is not just for good, it's also for good business. And the last thing I want to talk about is technical accessibility. And now it gets a little bit tricky, so let's see. So how do you or I browse the web? So when I'm opening a website, I'm noticing things that are bigger, right? Things that have a certain padding or a certain spacing or something like that. But there are also people that use assistive technology. And there are a few common screen readers out there, which is JAWS, NVDA, or VoiceOver. And the interesting thing about these is that 75% of the people that use screen readers, according to some surveys, rely completely on them, but 25% actually use them and they can see, or they have low vision. So some people just use them for convenience. So has everybody here heard our screen reader? Half. So let's do that.
Reload this page. Sentence red link, red content. Visited link, home. Visited link, home. Visited link, walk. Visited link, resources. Visited link, task. Visited link, smart talk. Visited link, today island. Heading level 1. Hey, I'm Stefan. I develop digital services and products. Heading level 2. Walk. Heading level 3. Tester static site shows part more. Heading level 3. The new era of static sites. How heading level 3. Monthly digest. March. Heading level 2. Task. You heading level 3. AOM. Accessibility object model. Really quick. You heading level 2. Heading level 3. Heading level 2. Walk. Heading level 1. Hey, I'm Stefan. I visited. Link. Follow me on visited. Link. Follow me on git link. Follow me on the leading list.
So what you just saw was that I was just navigating around the page, right? I was also jumping from headline to headline, and I was jumping through links, or commands like, hey, please go to certain area landmarks, like a navigation or something. This is what, how this works. WebAIM, which stands for Web Accessibility in Mind, and then this is a non-profit organization that deals with accessibility. They did a check for technical accessibility errors in 2011, and then they did it again last year. And as you see, we're not doing such a good job today. And this is even ignoring contrast errors. These errors are all based on a specification that is called the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. There you see 2.8, and you see that it's a little bit old, but there is an extension to that coming actually in the next month. So there is also there are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1. which is an additional rule set to the 2.0, and this will be official recommendation in June. So is today the first or the third? So we made it. June. So and these guidelines are basically based on 4 different guidelines or principles. So and just so that you have heard them. So products we build should be perceivable, which means that our users should be able with one of their senses to receive or perceive what we're building, right? Then we've got operable. Do the products we build work with other devices than a mouse or a trackpad, which covers the screen reader use case? Are they understandable? Is the product so that you can follow? Are the sentences readable? Sometimes you read a paragraph and it's like, wait, what is written there? Just because it's too long to understand. And they should be robust. Do the products work in older browsers or in Opera Mini? All these kind of things are part of technical accessibility. And the first thing talking about technical accessibility is semantic markup. And that's the first thing where people smile a lot when I talk about that. And it only takes me a few minutes when I look for errors for technical accessibility. So let's have a look at one. So what you see there is a Google Maps widget. It's perfect. I'm just tabbing around. I'm just using this with my keyboard. And yeah, kind of works. Oh no, wait, it was not working, right? Let's do that again. So it's a Google Maps widget. And there's no way to hit plus and minus with a keyboard. Just works with the mouse. So when we inspect this, this is what we get. Typical div soup. Well done. So how could we fix this? Well, we could throw tab index minus 1 on the divs, which makes them kind of focusable, but they will not be receivable or focusable with the keyboard. So let's go with the 0 there. So little hint, when you use tab index, only go with these values if so. But now when a person taps through or focuses this thing, the person doesn't know that this is actually a button. So let's put roll button on it, right? But now when you hit the space bar, nothing happens, right? So, or enter key. So let's throw some JavaScript on it to make that work. Or at the end, just use a normal button, man. And when you see these kind of things, you see them, or when you look around, you see these over and over again. If you can use the web platform to do things, let's just use it. native implementation have more support for environments. Browser vendors can optimize these things. Fewer code is at the end better code, right? And I see a lot of people smiling about semantic markup, but it's neither simple nor unimportant. Another thing I want to talk about is focus handling. And great focus management is essential for a good product. And I'm a computer power user. I use the keyboard a lot. So let's have a look at another website here. And I start the focus in the search field. Do you see where I'm tabbing around? No. The 3 most evil lines in CSS about accessibility. Outline 0. And I'm reading and dealing with accessibility for quite a while, and I had the opinion for quite a while that was like, never touch the outline. But I recently changed that actually to something like, always think of the outline. And the reason for that was that I was reading an article, and the comment below the article was saying that. So the reader had a father that had to switch browsers because Firefox just has a too subtle, tiny outline. And when you think of this, it really depends on which website you wanna see, right? So here you see 3 different sites with different focus in different browsers. And for example, this is a good one here, the blue one. When you're in Chrome and you're going to the Chrome or developer documentation, they have a blue background. You don't see the focus on the Chrome docs with Chrome because they were not thinking of this. But why are people disabling the outline in the first place? The reason is that. So you've got a link, an input field, a native button, and a link that looks like a button. This is what drives people crazy. Personally, I absolutely don't care, but there's a solution coming, and the solution was called Focus Ring, but writing specs is hard, so it's now Focus Visible, which will be a pseudo class at some point with which we can detect if the focus was triggered by the keyboard or by mouse or something like that. There's this really nice article by Patrick Lauke, and if you want to read more about this, and also Rob Dodson did an LEcast episode about that. So let's talk about something else. How hard can it be to build an accessible modal? Rob Dodson from Google said once, the modal is the boss battle in accessibility. So what does that actually mean? It's just display none and display block, right? So according to specs, an accessible modal has its own tab sequence. It closes on escape, it focuses the first element, and it returns the focus to the last element. So let's have a look at a focusable and an accessible modal.
Dialog tutorial. Visit. Help. Show dialog button. Name. Dialog. Name. Edit text. Please enter your full name. You are currently on text field. Pose. Button. Put 2 items. Save. Button. Stefan. Insertion and pose. But save. Button. Show dialog. Button. Name for name. Stefan. Show dialog. Button. Name for voiceover off.
So what you just saw is that I opened it with a keyboard. I was moved into it. I was not able to get out of it. And then I closed it and it moved back to focus where I was coming from. If you want to know or learn about focus management, Rodney Rehm wrote this accessibility library, LAJS. There's a lot of good stuff in there when you want to learn about these kind of things. But let's talk about the focus trap for a second. How hard can it be to keep the focus inside of the modal when you're doing this? Well, you have to add tab index -1 to all the needed elements. You have to set focusable false, remove controls from audio, override element focus, right? So maybe something is hanging around. Add pointer events none to everything, and then ARIA disabled true, so that the accessibility tree and assistive technology knows that the rest is not available anymore. This is a lot of work. But there's something on its way, which is called inert, that was in the spec, was removed. So with inert, you can remove things from the accessibility tree and make them inaccessible. And also what we have is the dialog element coming, which will look like this. And I have to rush a little bit because I'm running a little bit of time. And so at some point we will have something like show modal, which then does all the work for us. So this is something I'm really excited about in the future. This is polyfillable, and a modal is nothing without accessible content. So let's have a look at another example.
VoiceOver on Chrome. How I learned about JavaScript. Window. Link. Image. Go to the profile of John Doe. Link. Follow. Button. Engineer. Drinking too much coffee. APR. 1. Middle dot. 7. MINIFY. Heading level 1. How I learned about JavaScript. /1 star H 1 PH 8 GB 3 I 7 GPH 5 AG 1 HMSQ.png image. /1 heading level 1. How I learned about.
So 2 issues here. The first one, there was this middle dot in the middle, right? There was a pseudo element hanging around. Just because it is in generated content doesn't mean that it is not accessible for screen readers. So we can fix that with an ARIA hidden and remove it actually, which is actually really nice in this case. And then we've got, alt text, right? Let's all set alt text. In this case, it's this image of Seattle for this JavaScript article. I'm not really sure if this plays a big role for this article anyways, which means that you can set an empty alt attribute or a role presentation to remove it from the accessibility tree. And I will skip over the fixed version. Writing a good alt text for images is actually really, really hard. So if you want to learn more about this, I can highly recommend this article by WebAIM. That is really, really cool. Another example, links.
Stefan Judis, web development, window, link. Check out the project. Heading level, Proof Tooling is a shared with link. Proof 20 the course is an NPM desktop client to deal with daily work. Check out the project, check out the project, check out the project. Can they use projects on default? VoiceOver off.
So how much value does check out the project have? Or read more? This is what we do, right? And this is the markup that I had initially. But we can fix that with an ARIA label. But now I already feel now I have to maintain 2 strings here and I don't like that. You can also connect that with headlines or with different elements, right? So with this,
VoiceOver, Forest is an NPM, heading level 3. Forest is an NPM desktop client. Forest on GitHub. Performance tooling today on GitHub. Design mode Chrome extension on GitHub. Link. VoiceOver.
I think this is cool. It's kind of geeking out because you see something and hear something else. If you wonder how to make these kind of things accessible, Leonie Watson has you covered there. And these kind of things so far were only inconvenient, right? Let me show you a breaker.
VoiceOver on Chrome. Stefan Judis start. Window. Stefan Judis. Insertion and edit text. Name. Edit text has keyword focus. Your pizza. Name. Unselected. 1 characters. Publish pages. Button. You are currently on a button inside of web content. To click this button, press Ctrl, Option, Space. To exit this web area, press Ctrl, button. VoiceOver off.
Did you hear that? That worked? Now, when you think of your e-commerce business, right, and you add something to cart with Ajax, and you're not telling assistive technology that this actually happened, this is a breaker. This is affecting the conversion rate. So what was happening here? There was this paragraph. We can announce this or make this available using an ARIA landmark role and ARIA live. And then we can also define how aggressive we want to interrupt what is read out right now. And with this, these kind of actions actually become accessible. And we'll also jump over the version. So if you're interested in more how to build accessible components, Hayden does a really good job here. And there's also this document for ARIA that describes how you build accessible components, which is a really good read. When I started dealing with accessibility, I kind of had this opinion here that also my friend Carl has. He once said that he believes that making things accessible should be required because it's the right thing to do. And for me, this kind of makes sense. But I work in Berlin, startup city, JavaScript rules, right? And we all make a good living. And I think this is not drastic enough. So I think that it's a big misconception that we're doing people favors. Right? I mean, I'm doing a good living, and I think that building accessible things are part of my job. And 240 lawsuits in the US agree with me. All EU governmental sites have to follow a given accessibility standard. Norway enforces accessibility standards for every new site since 2013. Austria enforces for e-commerce too. Enforced accessibility standards are on their way. If you want to meet them, there's this one document, and I will do on point probably. So at the end, what I wanted to tell you in the last 45 minutes is, man, it's not only about conversion, right? At the end, it's about being affordable, being inclusive, and being accessible, because we are building stuff for people. And I want to build the best products possible. And I want them to be used by as many people as possible, right? Because this is my day job. And to achieve that, I have to think of these people. Because depending on what we're building, for some people, an accessible internet literally makes a world of a difference. 45 minutes.
Oh, thanks very much. It's really, really informative. We've got a couple of people asking if the slides will be up anywhere. It's there. It's there. It's massive, isn't it? It's just huge. Right, questions. There's one. We've got one. If anyone else has got any, just quickly pop them in now. How do you deal with bad designs? Oh, this is a great question. I want to know the answer to this. How do you deal with bad designs that have already been signed off by management even before they need to be implemented?
Well, this is an ongoing discussion everywhere, right? At the end, it's just going back and forth. In terms of accessibility or inclusive design, what usually helps is just show situation where this doesn't work for the certain person. So for example, contrast is my big role here, or my big thing all the time. When I get a really low contrast ratio, I get the designer, we go outside, and then I'm showing on the phone, hey, can you read that? Of course, it's always going back and forth, right? Because some people are open for critique and some not. So there is no silver bullet, it's just talking.
So if you can kind of prove it, give an example, for example, that you can kind of change their mind, sway them a little bit. I find that is useful because, All right, we got any more? My internet keeps dropping out, so that's not ideal. Can anyone see slide 8? Thank you. Good. What about replacing outline with styles for focus instead?
It's fine as long as it's recognizable that this is the focus then.
Tick. Did you analyze CMSs like Drupal and WordPress, and how is the accessibility of those out of the box?
I'm working for another CMS vendor, so I didn't check Drupal and WordPress for a while.
I heard earlier that Drupal is
we heard that from Bram today.
Yeah. I think Drupal's doing all right. So well done, guys. Right, any more? I think that is it, and it's time for coffee break as well. Thank you, Stefan. That was really useful.
Thank you.
Thanks.